We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, a podcast that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Joining me once again as guest curator is my former Tunestiles Podcast co-host, Mr. J Sweet J. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, man. I feel like Alec Baldwin. I'm part of the Five Timers Club, right? That I've been with you 5 times now, right?
Do you get a 5-timer jacket now at this point? I don't know.
I think you owe me a jacket, yes.
Well, I guess that means it's time for me to look up some jacket-making podcasts.
Well, let's do this. Let's get it out of the way. It won't be jacket. It'll be board shorts.
There you go. Board shorts, 5-timer board shorts for
That's right.
Sweet. Well, tonight, you and I are going to be talking about a topic that I'm sure is near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is something that it's kind of a weird topic when you really think about it because it's so subjective. Tonight, we're creating the ultimate underrated 90s rock mixtape. And to me, that really casts a wide net over countless musical genres. So first of all, Jay, I guess my question would be, how do you personally define an underrated 90s rock song?
Well, I'll say this. You texted me shortly before we began and said, well, I've looked at all of my my selections and not one of them has cracked the top 40. So I said, oh, it's going to be that kind of a podcast. But for me, I think that, they're not necessarily that they hadn't cracked. Obviously, like not having that Billboard heft behind them kind of speaks a little bit to the underratedness of it all. But I think too is, even though that if you crack into the top 40 and you hit, mid-level, if you feel like, for me, I felt like a few of these are a little bit more deserving a little bit more accolades than, oh, well, yeah, they peaked at like, number 38 on the top 40 or something to that effect. That kind of thing. So that's what it meant to me.
And that's interesting because the word underrated, like I said, it's a very subjective word. So it's realistic that somebody who listens to this show could honestly, truly believe that Green Day, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Counting Crows, in the scheme of 90s music, when you're comparing them to the Mariah Careys and the Boyz II Men, the real chart leaders of the decade, one could make an argument that those bands are quote-unquote underrated, and you could probably make a decent case for it. But my approach was like I had texted you earlier. I kind of wanted to go for the bands that might make listeners of this show go, what? Why haven't I heard that name in a long time? And
Sure.
Then when they hear the song, have that moment, that musical spider web cleared from their brain. Like, oh my God, I used to rock this song all the time. I haven't heard this in decades. And I'm hoping that we can kind of bring some of these songs back into the conversation, because I feel like some of these bands weren't at the level of Green Day, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Counting Crows, but maybe should have been.
Okay. I'm looking forward to hearing what you came up with, because I know you mentioned rock at the top of the show, but I've got a couple of them that are like R&B and some of them that are pop as well, because the 90s was my radio wheelhouse. That was where I was spinning records at clubs and stuff still, before CDs really took over the mix and digital really took over the DJ business. And saying that to say that a couple of the dance music, what they call electric dance music or electronic dance music these days, which we just called dance music back in the 90s, made it on my list as well.
Okay, I do have a few songs that could conceivably blur the line between rock, pop, and dance. So I'll just leave it at that. But in my mind, when I thought of underrated 90s rock, It was what I was listening to throughout the 90s. And it was a lot of the underground bands that got a lot of love on college radio, but never made that jump to mainstream radio. And if they did, it was a minor MTV video hit or a minor radio hit. But on college radio, these songs, if you were a fan of college radio in the 90s, these might actually be the overrated 90s rock mix.
That's right.
Because if you listen to college radio, a lot of these are going to be very familiar to you.
Oh, man, they sold out, man.
Listen, I mean, so, you know, and I'm sure, you know, any of the listeners that followed you over, which I would think would be a good number of them from the Tunestiles days. My radio experience, I was a spoiled, rotten radio kid. I didn't work at a college radio station. I worked at a professional, like, student run, but it was a professional, like, formatted, not, you know, this hour we're going to play alternative stuff. This hour we're going to play indie. This hour we're going to play country. This hour, you know, wasn't that kind of thing. It was a top 40. And then right around midstream, we shifted because the music changed. The music of the 90s changed and alternative became the big thing. So we initiated that format flip. So I've got a whole bunch of those kind of songs too, and I'm sure you and I are going to match up on a few of them, so I'm looking forward to it.
I'm curious to see where we match up and where we actually disagree. So let's get down to business. Tonight, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Jay and I will be curating an underrated 90s rock mixtape, and we'll use the old cassette deck approach. Jay, as my special guest, will begin side A with his first song choice, and then I'll add a song that I feel best follows up that choice. We'll then flip-flop choosing songs until we've mapped out 10 songs for side A. We'll then give our mixtape a proverbial flip, and we'll map out side B, only this time I'll kick things off with Jay choosing second. Our overall goal for the episode is to craft the best underrated 90s rock mixtape possible through only 20 songs. And at the end of the show, you can take our conversation to the next level by visiting the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com to give our final mixtape a listen via the embedded playlist. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. There you can enjoy ad-free episodes of the show, become a future guest, and so much more. Now, Jay, a few of the Patreon mixtapers chimed in with songs they would use to kick off our underrated 90s rock mixtape, and I want to give a few quick shout-outs. Tom Hutchinson chimed in with Mustard Plug's You, Everclear's Heroin Girl, and Therapy's Nowhere. The Voodoo Child, David Lee Smith, chimed in with Badlands 3-Day Funk. Sean Goff chimed in with Built to Spill's I Would Hurt a Fly, saying it starts off a bit slow and moody because, of course it does, but he likes how it builds through the course of the song, and he also points out that in real life, you might have trouble fitting all 10 songs on one side using this track. It is over 6 minutes. Great choice. And Chad Lamassa chimed in with Whale's Hobo Humpin' Slowbo Babe. He called it a super fun track that maybe was a Beavis and Butthead video. He wasn't 100% sure on that one. Chad, 1, great song choice, and 2, it 100% was a Beavis and Butthead video, ending with Beavis proclaiming, "Whoa, look at that. I didn't know chicks in videos wore underpants." I absolutely love the pick. Thank you. I worked on that for about an hour before we logged on here. So just remember, if you want to chime in for future My Weekly Mixtape episodes, join the Mixtaper family at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
So, Jay, with that musical food for thought out in the atmosphere, I'm officially pressing the record button on our mixtape, and the floor is yours. Why don't you dive into the song you chose to kick off Side A?
That's a great honor, and it's a really hard choice. So back in, we could have gone 100,000 different ways because I get to start the whole thing. But I think something that is held dear to my heart is 1995 when REM put out Monster. The radio station that I had mentioned before that I worked at on the SU campus had flipped formats to an alternative pop station, and we kicked everything off with What's the Frequency, Kenneth, which was a fantastic song. I think ultimately a lot of people could go back and forth on whether or not REM is overrated, underrated, or perfectly rated. That's a debate we could do a whole separate podcast on. But for me, I think that Monster was a deeply underrated album. And I went with Strange Currencies off of that album.
Wow.
That's a great song. I love the melody of it. I love Michael Stipe's really, really passionate vocals. He tends to do that regularly with his music. But with this song, he really poured on the emotion and the passion that you felt in the lyrics.
Now, I'll say this. REM was not the first band that came to mind for me, but when you mention it, it actually makes sense because REM is one of those bands that's just so friggin' influential. And they had the time where what they were doing was top 40 pretty much every time. And I'm talking about from Stand through Losing My Religion, Shiny Happy People, Automatic Through the People. I feel like they had a good string of hits. However, in the scope of rock music, even though they were, again, an arena selling band, I feel like the scope of their catalog as a whole is underrated. There
Absolutely.
was a section where they were a mainstream all over the place. And I feel like Strange Currencies was definitely a top 100, not a top 40 single. Should have been, because I'll just go out ahead and say it. I actually like Strange Currencies more than Everybody Hurts.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just love the song. And it's kind of a slower way to start things out, which is really interesting because usually people go for something more like, let's hit the ground running. And you kind of easing into this one.
We're going to ramp it up. Initially, when we went through this, when you and I started originally kind of throwing this idea around, I was thinking, songs like Black Cat by Janet Jackson or En Vogue. Oh, why am I pulling a blank on the title of the song?
Free Your Mind?
Free Your Mind. That's the one. Thank you. I can't. Yeah, I'm getting old, man. It's enough for my brain. But those kind of songs, and the argument could be made, well, yeah, maybe they weren't as... Those are perfect songs, by the way, that blur the lines between pop, R&B, and rock, right?
Yes.
Especially Black Cat, Free Your Mind, the really hard-driving guitar riffs. And in the scope of rock and roll music, maybe not so much of an underrated song because they were all over the radio, but they are really good. They are really good songs.
See, and here we go. The word underrated is so subjective that I can't argue it because what's underrated to one person is overrated to the other. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow you up on a couple of instances here. You went with REM and you went with a slower song. So some people will argue that REM isn't underrated, and you started off with a slower tune. So I'm going to follow you up with a song that's also slow, but with an artist that to some people, they might say, who? Other people might go, what are you crazy? And the people that are going to say, what are you crazy? Are definitely those who are blues fans, because I've already talked about this artist twice, both on episode 55, the Ultimate Modern Blues Rock Playlist with Jax Hollow, as well as episode 60, which was my interview with legendary blues guitarist Walter Trout. And this artist guested on the title track to Walter's new album, Broken. And I'm going to go with Beth Hart, but I'm going to go off of her 1999 album, Screaming for My Supper. And I'm going to go with her only pop radio hit, which reached number 90 on the Billboard US Hot 100. And I'm going to go with LA Song, Out of This Town. Absolutely beautiful pop rock ballad. And her voice is so stunning and so soaring in this song. It blows my mind that she didn't have more Billboard Hot 100 success. She gained the success and notoriety that she deserves through the blues scene. So blues fans listening to this episode are going to be kind of going, well, Beth Hart's kind of a household name. And yes, she is in the blues world. But in the pop, rock, Billboard Hot 100, this was her only visit there. And I mean, look, she has got such an incredible voice. In 2022, she put out an album of all Led Zeppelin covers, and she just slayed it. But LA Song just hits me every single time I hear it on an emotional level, and it kind of the same way Strange Currencies does. So I feel like it's an answer to that song on several levels.
Well, that's a great tune and a great pick too. I didn't, like I said, you had texted me earlier and you said, yeah, there's not one that really's cracked the top 40 here. And I started sweating like that Key and Peele skit where he's got the sweat pouring down of it's like
Yes.
water gushing up. That was me. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to know a lot of these, but yeah, that's what a fantastic song. And yeah, that does follow up Strange Currencies really, really well. And I know we talked about Janet Jackson, talked a little bit about En Vogue and having that female voice and that how that distinction is made between crossing genres before Janet and En Vogue with the pop and rock world. And you're talking about blues and rock and independent alternative stuff as well, which is just, it sums it all up nicely. Well, that puts me in a position. Let's, how do we follow that? Let's start to wrap this up a little bit hotter. A lot of the songs that I came up with too are probably songs that you wouldn't have recognized if not for the fact that they had come off of really good soundtracks of decent movies. And in the 90s put out a lot of great music related soundtracks. And I'm looking right at you, Empire Records. So we're going to talk a little bit about Edwyn Collins and Never Met a Girl Like You. That song is very retro for what it was. It had a really distinct sound to it that was very retro, very, what you would say 60s, right? Like mid-late 60s.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That rock feel of it. And what a great song. You would, if not for the Empire Records soundtrack, you probably wouldn't have known that it existed and the popularity of how that movie did.
What a fantastic pick. I love the Empire Records soundtrack. I actually had Sugar High in my list as an underrated song that really didn't get any airplay. So to me, the underrated nature of that song was the fact that it was in the movie, and anyone who's a fan of the movie loves that song. It's the finale, the band on top of Empire Records. And I love that song so much. A Girl Like You, this played into this vibe that came out in the mid 90s that Urge Overkill also helped usher in when they did the cover of Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon.
Yeah.
The Neil Diamond song for Pulp Fiction. I feel like Urge Overkill and A Girl Like You really go back to back well.
Absolutely.
And you know what? Crap, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to put Urge Overkill in next because those two back to back is a vibe. And it's also a soundtrack song. And I'll be completely honest, Jay, this one wasn't even in my bank. But as soon as you mentioned Edwyn Collins, it was like, Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon has to come on next. And looking it up as we speak, it only hit number 59 on the Billboard US Hot 100. So it falls into my criteria. So I didn't just do a 180 on myself here. So I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, I absolutely love the pick. And you can also kind of go, if you really wanted to dive into it, Tito and Tarantula, Back to the House That Love Built from Desperado. You can go down that road.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Another really we could totally do like a 90s soundtrack thing similar to episode 19 that I did with Ryan Pack from the Soundtrack Your Life podcast. But yeah, I have to follow up A Girl Like You with Urge Overkill's cover of Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon.
Well, now that you've done that, that gives me a perfect place for this next tune that I've picked. And it 100% sums up the best of all worlds kind of thing, where we're talking rap, R&B, maybe hip hop and rock and roll as well. And I'm going back to Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Okay.
With their Wild Side, because of the sample that they took from the Velvet Underground, right?
Yeah. Wow, you're pulling the Marky. I'll be honest, I did not expect that at all. But there is the rock vibe using the Lou Reed Velvet Underground sample. Now that to me, I think that was a top 10 hit regardless. But when
Might have
people
been.
mention Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, they're going right to Good Vibrations.
Sure.
So this is one of those songs that might fall under that category of, did you know there was another hit in the 90s? Because I remember this video a lot, but as time has looked back upon the Funky Bunch, I think it is all Good Vibrations, and I feel like this one does get overlooked. Well, I don't have anything. I have almost 30 songs on my list, but I don't have anything that's going to naturally flow out of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. But this is the second half of the side, so I could do a little bit of a pivot here. And here's a sentence that I never thought would come out of my mouth. We're going to go from Marky Mark. I can't even say it. We're going to go from Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch to 1996 and the Squirrel Nut Zippers. Let's go Hell from 1996's Hot. It reached number 13 on the alternative airplay charts, but surprisingly, at least around the New York area, this song was all over radio, never cracked the top 100. Shocking to me that that's the case. And this song, definitely, there was that moment in the 90s where you had the Squirrel Nut Zippers, and then when you really wanted to go more into the swing, you had the Brian Setzer Orchestra, you had Cherry Poppin' Daddies, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, Royal Crown Review.
That's right.
You had this movement that I felt like came out of nowhere and left just as quick. But Hell is one of those songs that seemingly overstayed that movement. And in 2010, ska punk band Streetlight Manifesto covered that song for the 99 Songs of Revolution Volume 1 album. And if you're a TV fan, Lucifer, there was a episode called Bloody Celestial Karaoke Jam, and the whole cast performed this song. So it's still, and that was only back in 2021, so this song is still relevant that many years later. And I feel like this was Squirrel Nut Zippers. I mean, they have amazing music, perennial favorites. They have a lot of stuff post Hell, but I feel like in most people's musical lexicon, Squirrel Nut Zippers starts and stops at Hell, and that kind of sucks. So hopefully this will get people going down that Spotify or Apple Music rabbit hole and listening to some of the other really incredible music they have. And yes, I do want to fully concede that in no way, shape, or form does this make any sense coming out of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
No, I think I did that on purpose.
Bastard.
But I think, but it is such a great, I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what you were talking about, that mid 90s, like smack dab 95, 96. There was that period where you were getting Squirrel Nut Zippers and Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy and all that. It's like a flash in the pan kind of thing. And it could have been so much more, but I think it morphed back into the ska pop punk kind of era where you get your Goldfinger here in your bedroom, which is the song that I'm going to follow you up with.
All right. Okay.
It's another great song, great horns, and some real good meat behind it. I could have gone with Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, but I think in terms of underrated, I think you couldn't have gotten out of the door without getting bombarded with the impression that I got. So I think Goldfinger is a better choice there.
Absolutely love this band. John Feldman is a genius in the studio. He's worked with everybody from Blink-182 to Avril Lavigne, and he just knows what that pop punk sound is supposed to sound like. And he did so much with Goldfinger. Goldfinger, to me, is one of those bands. They're one of my favorites from the scene. And John is definitely a bucket list guest to have on my weekly mixtape at some point, because I'd love to pick his brain about what he's done in the studio as well as what he's done with Goldfinger. To me, this is one of those bands that I didn't even consider for underrated, because I've listened to every single one of their albums. I own their entire discography. So in my world, I know so much. I've seen them so many times live. They're at that level that there's no way they could possibly be underrated. But as soon as you said it, I went, And I looked at Here in Your Bedroom, and it only cracked 47 on the Hot 100. And that shocks me.
Criminally
Absolutely
low.
shocks me. This band should be massive. They're so much fun. I mean, you think about songs like Superman and Mabel, and you can go into Wasted from some of their more recent albums. And the album they did with Travis Barker on the drums, 2017's The Knife, they're just as relevant as they were when they first came out. So to me, never would I have thought to put Goldfinger on here, but it's an absolutely perfect pick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this kind of upbeat vibe we've got going out. I'm going to pull the horns out of it, but I'm going to keep that pop, punk, indie, power pop element at play. And yes, it's kind of all of that. This song is power pop perfection, period. When I think of what a perfect power pop song is, across all decades, I go to Bye Bye Love by the Cars. I go to Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne. And off of 1996's Regretfully Yours, I go with Superdrag's Sucked Out.
That's a great tune.
It reached number 17 on the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart, and that was it. And this song is just power pop perfection.
Was that not used in American Pie?
I know James Lade was the big song from the American Pie movies, and that's also
American
in my
Pie.
bank of songs tonight that I might talk about at some point. But,
Mine too. Spoiler.
yeah, maybe. Might be a spoiler there. I don't remember if Sucked Out was in it, but it was that type of vibe and that type of sound at that time where if it wasn't, it really should have been.
Yep.
It's one of those songs that as soon as it starts, your feet are tapping and you just feel good.
Absolutely.
It puts a smile on my face every time I hear it, just like Here in Your Bedroom and just like Hell. So coming out of Goldfinger's Here in Your Bedroom, who sucked out the feeling? Superdrag.
That is great. That's a great pick. Again, that's another one of my favorites from that era as well. And from there, I could go in a couple of different directions with that. I could stay in that genre, in that feel, or I can take it in a different direction and kind of go off of that old 90s soundtrack magic. And I think I may do that. I think I'm going to go with Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitter.
Oh.
Now that song, I did that song with the band up in Albany with Even the Odd. And that song always got huge movement. Everybody loved when we covered that song. But mostly, if you think about, like, there's not, again, you talk about, is it overrated? Is it underrated? It's one of those songs that in pockets, a lot of people will know it, but don't know that they know it until they hear it.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. That song was about to make my bank, and then I saw it, and I had to cut it down. I had like 40-something songs, and I said, I need to narrow this down somehow. And this one actually reached number 38. So I used that as just a criteria to thin out my playlist a little bit, but this was definitely in my bank. My old cover band in the mid-2000s used to play this song at the beginning of the night because as soon as you did, people's faces would just light up with joy. Yeah. And the song is just so catchy. It's that power pop with a little drop of punk that comes out of Sucked Out so perfectly. And I don't understand how Harvey Danger didn't stick around at a bigger level after that song, because this song was everywhere. And I can tell you right now that there are bands throughout at least the New Jersey area that are still playing Flagpole Sitta at every show. It's got this timeless energy to it.
Right.
I want to say the song had something to do with disturbing behavior. It might not have been in the movie, but I just remember it something to do with that movie. Maybe it was the trailers or the TV, because they were pumping that movie like crazy on MTV at the time.
It's typical of Hollywood, right? To grab a song and use it in their promotional material, but it won't be on the soundtrack. But they've done that many times before. So you're probably right. Disturbing behavior. I do know that it was used for the theme song of Peep Show, which was a British sitcom, and was also later used on Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed.
There's one scene in that movie that my wife and I, to this day, laugh at hysterically. I don't even know the plot of the movie. We just remember this scene. They were dealing with this haunted house or something. And Shaggy and Scooby walk into a room and there's this ghost. He's like, I am the cotton candy ghost. And it's like Scooby goes, Rotten Randy? And then the ghost just gets this scared look on his face and it cuts back to them and they just like ate the ghost.
The whole ghost.
We watched that with the kids recently and I laughed so hard as if I had never seen it before. Because I loved Scooby-Doo growing up as a kid. So we saw both the movies when they came out because that was like our childhood nostalgia coming out.
Sure.
Anyway, Harvey Danger, Flagpole Sitta. There are still cover bands around New Jersey right now playing this song every weekend. There's a timeless energy to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to close out side A, I'm going to go with a song that was kind of the basis for me wanting to put this episode together. Because I was listening to the album, and I think it's what I actually texted you a picture of the album being like, dude, when's the last time you heard this? And I'm going to go back to 1996. This song reached number 14 on the U.S. Modern Rock chart, and they had another single from the album, Down Together, hit number 38. But I'm going off of 1996's Fizzy Fuzzy Big and Buzzy. I'm going with the Refreshments Banditos to close out side A. This group only had 3 full-length albums. They had the independently released Wheelie, Fizzy Fuzzy, and then 1997's The Bottle and Fresh Horses. Unfortunately, the Refreshments are no more, but they lived through Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers, who have definitely revisited Refreshment songs throughout the years. An incredible artist, incredible songwriter. This was an incredible album. That to me was, as a whole, one of the biggest underrated albums of the 90s. And I'm just going to go with the song that hopefully would be the most familiar to anybody who's not a Refreshments fan. And if you go back and you're listening to this and you go, oh, I remember Banditos, I like that song, you have to give the entire Fizzy Fuzzy Big and Buzzy a listen because it is just an absolute gem of an album. And I think the perfect exclamation point to close out side A.
We have talked about this song, particularly in this band, and how underrated they have been. It is criminal how unfortunate the band did not take off to the stratosphere like they should have. Because you're right, Fizzy Fuzzy Big and Buzzy was a damn good album. I remember that was one of the first or second records that I added as a programming director at the time when the station flipped formats out. And it was, I said, this song is awesome. And everybody else kind of poo-pooed it. Said, I don't know. It's kind of, all right, we'll see. And unfortunately, I was wrong. It didn't go anywhere. But it was a great song. It really was. I love every note of Banditos is one of the special places in my musical heart.
Yeah, the entire album to me, that's one of those ones that if I put it on, I have to listen to the whole thing all the way through. And anytime one song from it comes on for me when my playlist is going at random, I find myself ending the randomness of my playlist and going and putting the album on from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because anytime I get a chance to listen to it all the way through, it's like, let me take this opportunity. It's that good.
Definitely.
Well, there you have it, folks. Side A of our ultimate 90s underrated rock mixtape, which kicked off with REM's Strange Currencies, Beth Hart's LA song Out of This Town, Edwyn Collins' A Girl Like You, Urge Overkill's Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon, Mark...
You can't say it with a straight face, kids.
Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch's Wild Side. Look, if it didn't have the Lou Reed sample in the song, I would have probably
even having the
called
conversation.
I was about to say I would have.
We're not even having the discussion.
I would have pulled a veto card on that. I've never done it before. But you got me with Lou Reed. But back to the songs. Squirrel Nut Zipper's Hell, Goldfinger's Here in Your Bedroom, Super Drag, Sucked Out, Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitta, and the Refreshments Banditos. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs we've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. And now, Jay, I get the honor to kick off side B, and I'm going to bring a little bit more rock. We started off side A on a mellow note.
Yes.
I want to go to the opposite of that. I want to get people's energy and adrenaline pumping right from the get-go. And I'm going to go with a song by a band that it's my favorite song from this band, but it's not their biggest hit. And the song came out in 96 and reached number 64 on the Billboard Hot 100. However, 2 years earlier, in 1994, they had two different songs hit number 55 and number 41, respectively, on the Billboard charts. So all three of these very popular songs were top 100 hits, but none were a top 40, which makes my cutoff. The two songs that made number 55 and number 41, respectively, were Molly, 16 Candles, and Plowed. The band I'm talking about is Sponge, but the song I'm going with is Wax Ecstatic to Sell Angelina, the title track of 1996's Wax Ecstatic. I know Jason Whistle from the It's Not That Bad and There Can Only Be One podcast is a huge fan of New Pop Sunday. Sponge is still going strong to this day. To me, it's one of those bands that when people think of Rotting Pinata, they think of it being one of those very popular, almost seminal 90s albums. But judging by the numbers, they were not. They did not have a top 40 hit, so they reached my criteria for underrated, and Wax Ecstatic's just my favorite song by them. So
it's a great song. The guitar intro riff is amazing, and it hits you right in the chest.
That drum beat coming in right out of it, that boop, boop,
absolutely,
boop, 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 like yeah.
And again, I mentioned this now. This is the third song. I think it's criminal how badly they did not take off. Molly is. I gotta. Maybe it's because of the nostalgia being about Molly Ringwald. Maybe it's that kind of puts that on a different level for me. But that song is so good that you can't. How do you not snap your fingers and say you're naked in the back?
They're a great band,
definitely
across the board. I just don't feel like they got as much push as they should have, and they had the ammunition to back that up.
Yeah.
The three songs that were top 100 hits, I feel like should have been higher.
Agreed.
It blew my mind that none of these three were top 40 hits.
The only thing I can say that maybe, was a factor is the fact that it was a crowded market at the time.
Yeah.
And there were so many great bands in that vein that there's only so many numbers that you can have.
Right. And just like all eras and all decades, Billboard's Hot 100 is filled with a lot of pop and a lot of R&B. But being we're keeping this on the rock side of things, you really needed to cut through a lot of different genres to crack that top 40 as a rock band, which, as we're seeing tonight, is not as easy as it sounds. Because the top 40 was overrun by Mariah Carey, Boyz II Men, all of these endless strings of number one hits. Rock music was, as a whole, underrated in the 90s.
That's right.
At least judging by the Billboard Hot 100's lens.
That's right.
Because you can't look at anybody and be like, Nirvana's Nevermind is an underrated album. That just sounds weird coming out of my mouth. But when you compare it to the album sales that were happening for the biggest R&B, pop, dance, and even country, Garth Brooks.
Right.
If you even want to go Achy Breaky Heart, these were crossover songs that the rock music really had to work extra hard to cut through. And Sponge is just one of those ones that didn't, and therefore are underrated to me.
Agreed. Well, coming out of that, Bri, I say we can go. I can go. I have two tunes that I'm looking at right now that I really would be remiss if this wasn't included on this list. So it's dependent on how they're both kind of down-tempo-ish tunes, and both a little bit dark, but one's a little bit darker than the other. And I think I might go. Let's go down that road for a minute and visit The Possum Kingdom by the Toadies.
Oh.
When that song popped on the radio, I thought to myself, this cannot be good. The subject matter is a little dark, makes me a little nervous, but the song itself is simplicity. It's got those great dark, crunchy chords, and the lead singer vocalizations over that it doesn't really get into the really great part of the song until it gets to the chorus of, I can promise you, I will treat you well, my sweet angel, so help me Jesus. And yeah, and it just soars. His voice is great. It's perfect for the song, and I think that song encapsulates the Toadies really, really well.
Could not agree more. My old cover band in the 2000s used to play this song again, first set, right around when I had mentioned Flagpole Sitta, the Toadies. God, I remember in our set lists, we used to go from Toadies' Possum Kingdom directly into Wheatus's Teenage Dirtbag. However, that came out in 2000, so I can't use it in this list.
Right.
So I'm going to go with another song that I think taps into that same energy, where the music is upbeat and happy, but the lyrical nature is a little darker. And it's a song that is by a group that this is definitely their biggest hit. Reached number 5 on the Billboard Modern Rock chart and number 27 on the Billboard Mainstream chart. And it's a group that I think just overall is criminally underrated once again. From 1992's Puzzle, we're going to go with Dada and Disneyland.
Disneyland.
Dizzknee, and then you know how to spell land.
So you didn't get sued.
Exactly. But that song was just so, when you listen to the lyrics, it's this really catchy indie rock tune with these really depressing, sad lyrics. That was a perfect musical yin and yang. And the push and pull between the upbeat nature of the song and its tone is similar to that of the Toadies' Possum Kingdom, while maybe a little less visceral in the chorus. It's definitely a little bit more, I don't want to say soft, but it's definitely more, it's not as heavy as the Toadies' Possum Kingdom, but definitely stays down that vein. And musically, I think coming out of Sponge into Toadies into Dada is definitely telling a story here on side B so far.
I love it. I love it. So we're coming out of a Disneyland, and we can still talk about a little bit, you know, we could stay in that groove a little bit that we've got established here. How about, this is a band that I think also should have gone much further than it did. When I think, this might be a stretch, but in my brain, when I think of this band, I'm thinking about how they were kind of almost miscategorized, almost like a Cinderella, where they kind of got lumped into the hair metal era, but they were so much more than that. And I think when you think of a Meat Puppets band, they are not your classic quote-unquote alternative band. They just were like the Cult, very much so, like a real grungy rock band. And I'm going with Blackwater.
Yes. Thank you.
Somebody had to say it, right?
This was definitely on my list. Meat Puppets have a massive discography. Their first album came out in 1982. Their most recent album was, I want to say, 2019. They have a massive discography of music, but it was them working with Nirvana on the Unplugged special that really kind of pulled them into the alternative MTV universe. And then 94's Too High to Die capitalized on it, and they became kind of part of that scene 12 years into the band's run.
Yeah.
So to Meat Puppet fans, it's ridiculous that we're saying this because they're still at it and doing amazing things. However, in the grand scheme of music in the 90s, this song is friggin' underrated as hell.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those ones that I bet you there's some people that are going, I don't think I've ever heard this song. But as soon as you hear that guitar riff, you're like, oh, wait a minute. I remember this. I didn't know this was who did that, because it was all over radio at the time.
Exactly.
And I think what I'm going to do to follow that up is I'm going to bring it slightly down, but kind of in the same vibe, in the same era. And we talked about Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitta being attached to the Disturbing Behavior trailers. I'm going to go with a song that's specifically from the Disturbing Behavior soundtrack, as well as the band's 1998 album, Holiday Man. And I'm going to go with The Fly's Got You Where I Want You. Reached number 4 on the U.S. Bubbling Under Hot 100 singles chart. This song mixed that alternative rock sound with, I don't even know what you call it at the end, this kind of reggae, kind of sublime type delivery over heavy guitars. And the riff is so simplistic and so repetitive. The song is E to A. And that's it. And yet it's hypnotizing. and it pulls you in slowly. The song continuously builds, and the vocals, the falsetto hits in the chorus, it kind of brings you in and out of this driving verse into this beautiful chorus, then into this reggae over heavy guitars, into this big bombastic closing. This song covered a lot of ground, and I'm shocked that with the movie exposure and the soundtrack exposure, that The Flies didn't do more. And Got You Where I Want You is just a hell of a tune. So I think coming out of Backwater, it's a nice fit as well.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Again, you mentioned Holiday Man in 1998, Disturbing Behavior, starring, was it James Marsden was in that from X-Men? Very, very cool. And then when you follow up, they had their second single, She's So Huge, right? Adam Paskovitz, his voice is unbelievable, and it fit in that genre perfectly.
Yeah, She's So Huge did a little bit of damage on the alternative airplay charts, but it was nothing compared to the punch that Got You Where I Want You was. So She's So Huge would also fit under that possibly two-hit wonders category, because this would be the forgotten hit. I have Holiday Man. I think the entire album is actually really good. And they did put out another album after Holiday Man. Only 2 years later, it was called Out of My Way, I think. And then that was it, unfortunately. Great band, great song, and kind of leaving you for the second half of this side. You can kind of take this in any direction you want, I think, because the song ends kind of heavy, kind of upbeat a little bit. We're coming out of the slower Backwater, kind of mid-tempo-y type thing. You can kind of bring it down more. You could start working it back up for the second half of side B here.
I think you mentioned a band that I want to use, and I kind of, another one of them that I had a kind of an inkling flash across my head on side A of this fantastic tape. I think that this band had some really good songs to come out. This one I think was relatively overlooked, and it's unfortunate what has happened to this band. And it's, that plays a small, no small factor into it, where, the lead singer is no longer with us. But still, the music is really good. And we were talking about songs like Superdrag, Sucked Out. And I think this song fits perfectly next to a song like that. So this is a good place to kind of put this back into the mix. We're going to talk about Sublime's Wrong Way.
Ooh, okay.
I absolutely love the song. It's another one of those, dark lyrics and dark subject matter, but the tone is poppy and very bouncy. And you've got that ska pop punk kind of feel to it. So it's a great way to kind of take the side of the tape to the next level.
I absolutely love this pick, and Sublime was tragically cut short. I feel like Sublime would have been one of the biggest bands of the 90s, especially the latter half into the 2000s, had Bradley Nowell not sadly passed. I feel like this has been a very long time coming. Sublime has still been around. They've been doing the thing with Rome for many years.
Sure.
Just this past December, Sublime reunited with, are you ready for it? Jacob Nowell, Bradley's son, is now singing for Sublime. And if you look at some of the videos that are out of what they did, Sublime is back. And oh my God, he brings the same nuances that his father had, but with a youthful energy to it. I think Sublime's going to come back big time. Very cool. They've always been a fantastic group. I've loved everything they've done with Rome. And I know they're doing some shows throughout 2024 as like farewell to Sublime with Rome. And Sublime is now popping up on festivals with Jacob on vocals. And I'm here for it. I mean, look, if you're going to continue the legacy, why not Bradley's son? You can't get better than that. So I love this pick. And coming out of it, I'm going to go with one that it's not necessarily, I'm going to pull the ska part out of this. And this song was originally recorded in 1995 for the band's Bumper to Bumper album, but then became popular 4 years later in 1999 when the band re-recorded the track for Nasty Little Thoughts You might remember this group as the band who sang Kick Some Ass and Jay and Silent Bob's Strike Back, but we are going back to 1999. The song reached number 4 on the U.S. Bubbling Under Hot 100 singles. Stroke 9, Little Black Backpack. So much fun. This is one of those songs, again, it features that falsetto that I talked about in The Flies Got You Where I Want You. And we mentioned Wheatus. Obviously, they're not in the 90s, but that falsetto that was worked into alternative music towards the latter half of the decade. Stroke 9 does it so well. This song's got the off time for the verses, and then just the happy-go-lucky, bouncy chorus. Colburn and Company's played this song randomly over the years, and if the audience is our age, you see at least half the room light up like, oh my God, I haven't heard this song in so long, and they know every single word to it. And to me, I wish more people did, because Kick Some Ass is a great song. Vacuum Bag is Stroke 9 is a great band. And the fact that they never cracked the top 100, again, shocks me. Absolutely. Little Black Backpack.
That's a great tune. That's a great pick. And yeah, a lot of the indie culture knows Kick Some Ass and not necessarily the Stroke 9 is, they're what supremely underrated bands completely. And we could talk to Jim Santoro about that all day. I'm sure he would agree with us on that.
Yeah, Jim is the author of the Underrated Rock Book and the Underrated Rock Book 2. You know, he has been on the show before. Obviously, when he sees this episode out there, he's going to be like, guys, the hell, man.
Hi, I'm still over here.
We will definitely be having Jim back on again soon, but obviously be sure to check out those books if you want to read about a lot of great underrated rock albums. But Jay, what are you going to come out of Little Black Backpack with? I'm
going to take a hard left here. It's not quite the Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch hard left, but I'm going to go in a bit of a different direction. We're going to keep that poppy feel with the light kind of bounce to it. And let's go back to Big Audio Dynamite and Rush.
Whoa.
It's another one of those early 90s tunes that, was used all over the place. I'm sure in all sorts of trailers and commercials and such. And it's got the fallout of the rift between the Clash and, how Joe Strummer decided that they were going to do a more pop thing versus a more punk thing. And we ended up with Big Audio Dynamite.
That we did. This is a group that was, I'll just go ahead and say it, ahead of its time. I think this song did crack the top 40, though.
I'm pretty sure it did.
Yeah, I was not, in full honesty, in 1991, I was not listening to as much Big Audio Dynamite as I was Metallica, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. I was, as a freshman in high school, in that phase of life. And looking back, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of mad at myself because this is a great album. And when I discovered it a few years later, I realized what I had missed out on. But coming out of it, I have two songs I want to go with here because this is my last pick of the night. Do I lean into that dancey kind of vibe, or do I pull it back to the rock side of things? Just a little bit.
Either way, I have an answer.
All right. Well, help me out, Jay. What would you do in this situation? Would you lean into the dance or would you pivot back to the rock? Help me out. Because I'm literally 100% torn on these two songs. I love them both.
I don't know, man. I don't think we've got enough dance on this record yet. I would lean a little bit more to that side, I guess.
Okay, so then I'm going to say the song that I was going to, because people would be like, what the hell's, what was the other one? So the other one, there's already a full episode of my weekly mixtape dedicated to this artist, so I don't feel as guilty. I was going to put Letters to Cleo's Here and Now from 1995's
Fantastic.
Aurora Borealis.
Yep.
Episode 44, Kay Hanley and I had just such an amazing discussion. If you're a fan of Letters to Cleo, please, please, please go check out that episode. Check out their new music. Kay is a national treasure.
Let me stroke my weekly mixtape for a minute because that interview was fantastic. And I loved listening to her and then talking about her interactions with Adam Schlesinger and the emotion that came out of that. Just so good.
Well, thank you, man. Yeah, that whole interview, that was one of my favorite moments as a podcaster. That interview was just on another level.
Yeah, you should be proud, my man. That was a good one.
Thank you. All right. So with 100% love going out to Letters to Cleo, I'll lean into the dance. And this is, I had mentioned this at the top of the show because you had said you had pop and dance in your mind. This was the song that to me blurs the line between rock and dance. Came out in 1996, and this band had 2 hits from this album. They had one track called Drop Dead Gorgeous, which reached number 93 on the US Billboard Hot 100. But I'm going to go with the song that reached number 56. And I'm going to go with Republica's Ready to Go. Now, this is a song that you hear in stadiums. You hear it in sports promos. You hear it in movie trailers, in movies, TV shows. When you hear the song, most people are going to go, oh, I know this from this or from that or from here or from there, because this song is everywhere. Yet, I don't think people talk about this song as much as they should. The song didn't even crack the top 40, and yet it's a stadium anthem.
Oh, yeah. It was on Jock Rock, right? Or Jock Jams.
Yeah, that was on Jock Jams Volume 3. So here's this song that's kind of rock because you've got that don't, down, and you got the acoustic guitar in the beginning, but it's up against songs like Tribal Dance by 2 Unlimited and Come On Ride the Train by Quad City DJs. And it worked as a jock jam, but it also worked as an alternative rock song.
Yep.
Because of the acoustic guitar, and her voice is so just perfect. It had that little bit of raspiness, a little bit of distortion to it. Almost sounded like she was singing through a megaphone at times.
Yeah.
I love that effect in the 90s. And this is one of those songs that you could play in a dance club and a rock club and pull it off seamlessly. So as my last contribution tonight, coming out of Big Audio Dynamite, we're going to go with Republica's Ready to Go.
That's fantastic. It's a great band, overlooked big time. I think, again, if you're a sports fanatic of any kind, you've come across that song, at least snippets of it. We rocked that song hard in the college days, back when they flipped formats back from alternative to top 40. So, it was a great record, and it really, I'm not ashamed to say, I would use that before tests. I'd get pumped up. That was on my pump up mixtape that I would listen to before tests.
Okay, and I should probably point out to our friends listening in the UK, they might be throwing their hands up in the air because Republica is from the UK and they are a lot bigger there than they are here in the US. Yeah. So this is definitely coming from a underrated in the US perspective, because I think that, they have a greatest hits album out. So they probably are a lot bigger in the UK and a lot more widely known. So to our friends that are listening in the UK, I apologize, but here in the US, they are criminally underrated.
And you can throw a band like that, like Republica, in with the Chumbawamba, right? Because, again, they're huge over in England, and they didn't make it over here, which is unfortunate because that song, everybody knows that song. Everybody knows Tub Thumping.
Yeah, but the thing is, Tub Thumping is not indicative of Chumbawamba as a band at all. And I think that's the problem. They did not have another Tub Thumping because that's not what Chumbawamba is as a band.
That's right.
That's the issue there.
Very much like how we've kind of hinted at Smash Mouth with Walking on the Sun, how that was just a complete departure from the rest of their sound.
I'm going to be perfectly honest, Jay. When you were leading up to Sublime's Wrong Way and you talked about the singer passing, I really thought you were talking about Smash Mouth's Walking on the Sun, because everybody knows All-Star in the 2000s. But this was pre-All-Star, and at the time, Walking on the Sun was a very underrated rock radio staple.
Yep. And then, of course, they did the entirety of the Shrek soundtracks.
Yes.
So, and rest in peace, Steve. So, but also it kind of feels like Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray did a total 180 from Lemonade and Brownies into Fly and Every Morning.
That's right.
And all the other stuff they did post Lemonade and Brownies. Mean Machine and Rhyme Stealer are a completely different band. Sugar Ray toured with Korn.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
To Sugar Ray going out with pop acts.
Right.
And it's such a 180. I think we talked about that on like Tunestiles' second episode, Musical 180s.
Yep.
That's definitely one of them. So Jay, now we have talked about 19 different, unique, underrated 90s artists, and you get to close things out.
Whoa.
What Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch song?
And why is it Good Vibrations?
No, you'd go with You Gotta Believe if you're going to pick another underrated Marky Mark song.
I would probably pick something from his Steel Dragon era. I don't know. No, it's a tough one. What are we coming out of Republica with? That's a high energy, up tempo song. I really want to go with Matthew Sweet here. No relation. But I don't know if I want to go with Girlfriend or if I want to go with Sick of Myself. Because both of them were criminally underrated songs. That's going to be our catchphrase for tonight. You know what? Let's go with Sick of Myself just because it has that drive to it.
I love that song. One of my first college bands covered that. I love playing bass to that one. There is a real groove to that song. And you and I are both big Bowling for Soup fans.
Yep.
They do a great cover of it.
Definitely.
Sick of Myself is just one of those songs that I think had its moment on Top 40 radio, but didn't truly represent how amazing of an artist Matthew Sweet is. Because Girlfriend was just, again, such another unique, incredible song. And he's done so much since then.
Yeah.
But 100% Fun was really his biggest dabble with the charts as it reached number 2 on the Billboard Modern Rock charts.
I think you're right.
But even then, it wasn't much. And how? He's so consistently amazing.
It's, again, crowded market, and there are only so many top 40 slots to hand out. But he was on that the mid 90's. They did a cartoons, like they got a bunch of
the Saturday morning cartoon
soundtrack, and he did the Scooby-Doo theme song.
Yeah, that is one of my absolute favorite 90's compilations. Between his version of Scooby-Doo's Where Are You? You had Sponge, somebody we talked about at the beginning of the side, doing Go Speed Racer Go. You had Juliana Hatfield doing Josie and the Pussycats. You had the Ramones doing Spider-Man. Violent Femmes doing Eep Op Ork Aha means I Love You from the Jetsons.
That's right.
We also talked about Sublime in this side.
Yep.
They did Hung Kong Phooey. You had Face to Face doing the punk cover of On Popeye the Sailor Man, and Dig doing Fat Albert's theme, which Dig was actually in my list as well tonight.
Oh, very cool.
But we didn't get to it. And then finally you had Wax doing Happy Happy Joy Joy. Seriously, This compilation is 90's alternative rock perfection, because it's just oozing with nostalgia, but felt so fresh and modern. You could rock it from start to finish. Talk about an underrated compilation of the 90's. This is just friggin' amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally sidebarred with that. But there you have it, folks. Side B of our ultimate underrated 90's rock songs mixtape, which kicked off with Sponge's Wax Ecstatic to Sell Angelina, Toadie's Possum Kingdom, Dada's Disneyland, Meat Puppets Backwater, The Flies Got You Where I Want You, Sublime's Wrong Way, Stroke Nine's Little Black Backpack, Big Audio Dynamite's Rush, Republica's Ready to Go, and Matthew Sweet's Sick of Myself, no relation to Jay. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs we've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. Jay, as always, a blast. I'll get working on that jacket. I'm going to see if maybe I could start like knitting something out of yarn or whatever. I'll figure something out.
That'll work great for Chicago weather.
Yeah, thank you for being a 5-time guest. Looking forward to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Well, thanks for having me back on, my friend. It's always a pleasure. And as proven before, we could just sit here and talk music all day.
Yeah, I think 81 episodes of Tunestiles would prove that and then some. But thank you again, dude. Looking forward to the next time. And to everyone out there listening, remember, you can find My Weekly Mixtape on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can also head to myweeklymixtape.com to check out the full catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes. And if you like what you're hearing on the show, you can help me out by either telling a friend, leaving the show a 5-star review wherever you're tuning in, or becoming a Patreon mixtaper at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. There you can enjoy ad-free episodes of the show, become a future guest, and so much more. That's all for this week. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.